Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial for Church Video Mixpot. I'm Jason Calhoun. Make sure you check out the blog that I put together at www.jasoncalhoun.info and then click on the Church Video Mixpot. Yes, that's what it's called. I forgot for a second because I'm very tired as I record this. But anyway, what we have today is another tutorial, but this time in After Effects. So just should be kind of cool. What I'm going to be going over is some different text effects, because one of the things I want to do with these tutorials is not only just show you how to do cool things in After Effects. Well, cool to me anyway. But just some things that are easy for you to just apply to your project. It's not something that you have to take a long time to learn. It's not something super complicated. It's just something like, here's some cool ways to, in this example, to do some cool text. So here's what we're going to be creating. A couple of different text effects. This one is sort of, obviously, it's just kind of a glossy, sort of shiny text effect. And this is something that you can't really do natively in After Effects, as far as, there's not just like a shiny text filter exactly. That gives you, sort of this bubbled effect. It kind of looks like it has maybe some depth to it, and it looks like it's reflecting, like it has some material there and it's reflecting something. So anyway, kind of a cool look. And then we're going to use some of the same things we'll learn here to make this look, which is a totally different look. This one is, just a texture, and I added this text down here that's kind of, looks like it's maybe a part of the whole grungy texture, and there's a lot of options for really customizing this look. But I find that some of the things that you'll learn in creating this type of text effect can be applied to almost any time you use text, and it's really kind of powerful and kind of cool. So what we're going to do is start with this one, creating this text effect. And I did this the other night, and I created a couple other I guess samples here. This one here, if we drop the, let's see, what did I use? I used, well, anyway, not sure what I was doing there. Not sure what I've done. Oh, there we go. There it is. Well, doesn't that look wonderful? Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Is that the problem? What is the problem? Anyway, I don't know. It's all messed up. Do anyway, let's pretend that one's not there. That wasn't there. We didn't see that. Okay, so let's start with this shiny text here. So what we're going to do is go up to Composition, New Composition, and with this one I'm going to be creating just a smaller size video. It's still 16 by 9 aspect ratio. It's 800 by 450, and it's just about 3 seconds long. So let's hit OK. And what we're going to go and do is first set up this background. We have this kind of gradient background, which is really easy to do. It's not going to look quite the same at first, but in the end, we will get this effect. So let's create that. We're going to go to Layer, New Layer, and we want to create a new solid. The shortcut for that is Command Y on a Mac. So we can make this any color. It's black. And then we're going to apply a plugin, not a plugin, a filter to this. So go up to Effect, and then down to, what is it, under Generate, and it's called, what am I looking for here, Ramp. And this will just put a gradient over that solid. And so what we're going to do is just go in and change the colors. So let's see, let's make this one, I kind of like this tealish sort of blue color, so we'll drop that in there. And maybe we'll choose like a darker blue. And I'm going to change this from linear ramp, which is giving me a linear gradient, and I'm going to change that to radial, which will make it a circle, like a radius. They should call it radial ramp. Well, wait a minute, they did. Yes, fantastic. And to control the gradient, whether you're in linear or radial, you have these little circles here, these little buttons here, and I can move, this will just move my bottom color, and this will move my top color. So what I want to do is kind of pull down the dark and then pull up the light to kind of get more of a kind of a softer gradient there. So something like that. We're going to change this up a little bit, but that's a good starting place. So let's add our text by just clicking on the T up here and clicking in our comp wherever we want to add the text, and we'll come up with some kind of creative text. You always have to create think of something creative. So I can't think of anything more creative than that. Plus, that was hilarious, wasn't it? Because I said creative and then I typed creative. Yes. With this type of effect, this sort of shiny, kind of spacey, glossy look, it tends to work better with like a thicker, kind of a heavier typeface. So something like impact works well, and you should have impact on your system. So let's use that, shrink that down a little bit, and just place it right there. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, let's go back into our finished composite here and just take a look at the text and see what I actually applied here as far as effects. So what we have in here is this CC glass effect, and we'll add that and I'll show you what that does. Color emboss I'll add that and show you what that does, but I didn't use it in this finished one because it didn't need it, and I'll show you why. Then we have a CC light sweep and a glow effect, just to add. You'll see what it does. It's pretty subtle, but it makes a pretty big difference. And then we added this light burst, which is giving us this kind of flary, sort of, it looks like there's light behind it that's shining through. So that's kind of cool. So let's go ahead back into our composite we're working on here, and we're going to add this. Where'd it go? There it is. This CC light effect. Oh, first thing, actually, before we do that, let's change the color of this text. Now, for this effect, again, kind of this glossy look, you don't want to choose a color that's too dark or too light. Somewhere kind of in the middle. So choose whatever color you'd like. I'm going to choose kind of a blue just to go with it, maybe a little bit more of a green. But it's going to be right somewhere in the middle, and I'll show you, you'll see why as we get working with it, but just create that sort of a middle place to start with. And then if we need to like darken our background or lighten it up, we can do that later, but let's just start there. Okay, so we're going to add the CC glass effect. Now you can find that, let's see, I think it's under distort. Distort, CC, I don't see it here. So what I usually do is I'll come over to, you should have this panel here, this effects and presets panel. It gives you this little search bar, so you can type in whatever you think the effect's called. So I know it starts with CC. So if I bring that up and just kind of scroll through here, looking for glass, let's type in G for glass. It'll narrow down the search here a little bit. And there it is, CC glass. So it's under stylize. So you can find that under effect, stylize, and there it is, CC glass. So we'll apply it to our text there, and you can see right away it makes our text very soft and bubbly. You can actually use this same effect to kind of create sort of like a balloon look. If we kind of softened this up a little bit more even, you'd almost get sort of a, look like a balloon a little bit. Bring down our displacement a little bit more. Let's just actually bring that to 0. But the first thing we're going to do to create this is we're just going to zero everything out. The softness, the height, and the displacement. So just click on it, hit 0, and then enter. And we're just going to zero that out. What that does is brings it back to the original as if there's no effect applied. If I take the effect off, it makes really no difference. You can see that it's affecting the light a little bit, which is right here, this light effect. And I have the light intensity to 100. I can control, it actually has its own built-in light. Built in, which is the only thing that's affecting it right now. But so we'll set that to 100. Okay, what we're going to start with, and totally customize this. Don't just do what I'm doing. Use it as maybe a starting ground, but see what works for you. I'm actually going to lighten this text up just for now so that you can see it better. Or better yet, let's change the background, and maybe let's make the background a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to bring the top half of this gradient down and bring the bottom out so that you can just see it a little bit better. Actually, let's take out the background for now, because it's just we don't need to see it, and this way you can see the text a little bit easier. So let's go back into our text. Click on the text layer there, and let's see. The first thing we're going to do is just bring up the softness a little bit. And you're not seeing it really do anything yet because it's not going to until we affect the height. So the softness is going to affect the outside edge of this text, but not until we tell it how much, which is the height. So you can see right there already we're getting some highlights and sort of some rounded edges, and it looks like there's some light maybe reflecting off the text. So as we add this more and more, we're going to see this sort of edge grow out even more. Now you can see if we bring this like way up, it's just going to, it begins to almost do like an emboss effect. You know, I don't know how well you can see this, but it sort of almost does like this embossing effect. Now, that's not quite what we're going for. What we want to go for is more of like a reflection effect. So let's bring down the height a little bit to maybe something like 5. And then start to bring up your softness a little bit more until you find what works for you. So now you can see what it's doing. If we bring the softness down to 0, well, okay, that's not doing anything. If we bring it up to, I don't know, 1, we need a little bit more so you can see it. 2 is starting to do a little bit more. But you can see that it gives us that emboss effect. But as we soften it up a little bit more, it gets rid of that and starts to make it look a little bit more like there's just some depth to the text, and like the text is like reflecting a light somewhere. So, you know, you just have to play with it to get the right settings. If we go back to the original that I did, let's check and see what I had set here. So CC Glass, I had the softness at 0.3 and the height at 42. So let's see how that works for us here. Let's see, what did I say? What did I say? I already forgot. I have such a wonderful memory. Okay, 0.3. 0.3, and this was set to, what I think I said, 42. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Not bad. Now the difference here between this and our other one is probably the displacement. Yeah, I have the displacement here at 98%. So let's bring that up to 98. There we go. Okay, that's a little bit crazy there. That's not quite what I'm going for. So I'm going to try softening it up a little bit more. Oh, that's terrible. Looking awful. This is going to look better, believe it or not, once we add our background, because what's happening is it's just kind of showing a, basically it's like opaque here. Kind of, so what we're seeing is the background through here, and you're just seeing these harsh edges. And as we bring up the displacement a little bit more, that's just going to get worse and worse. But if we add our background in, you can see that what it'll do is it start to look like it's just reflecting the background, which is what we're going for. We're faking it, but you know it works. So play around with the settings just to get the look that you are going for. You know, I'm going to find something in here that works for me, but you have to find something that works for you and the look that you're going for. So I'm going to bring back my height a little bit, maybe bring up the softness a little bit more, because I don't want those hard edges. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Let's see, that's more like it. That's what I'm going for there. So you can see that, you know, depending on the font you're using and just your setup, it's going to be a little bit different. So like for this one, you know, I'm bringing up my softness. I'm at 6.57, and then my height is down to 4. I'm going to bring up my height a little bit more here, and that's starting to give us more of a realistic soft. That's way too much. It just jumped up there, obviously, but you know, what we're going for is this softness here, this soft edge. So there we go. That looks pretty good there. So you can see, you know, it's giving us, it's faking that effect. Like there's light hitting it and it's reflective. Now the face, the actual front of the text isn't affected yet. This is just affecting the edges, so it looks like there's some depth to the text, and that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's turn off the background again. And let's see, what's the next thing we need to add here? Oh, let me show you, like I said I would do, let me show you what the bump, what was it? I'm trying to remember what that filter was. Emboss, color emboss. Oh, it's been a long day. I got to shoot, just add that to the text, got to shoot Jason Castro today from American Idol, an interview and a performance. That was kind of cool. He has dreadlocks, by the way, the size of a small child. Like if there was a small child, but a fairly tall child at the same time, his dreadlocks would be as tall as that child. Just wanted to point that out. It's important to this tutorial. Okay, so you can see what the color emboss does. If I turn off our glass effect, it kind of does a similar effect. The edges are a lot more harsh. It just gives us, you know, a little bit of depth. It gives us a sort of shadow there. You know, it looks like the text maybe has, you know, some depth, but it's a lot more harsh. So the CC glass is doing something similar, but a lot softer and a lot more realistic. And So the reason you might want to add the color emboss, and you could, I mean, there's two embosses. There's a color emboss, and then I think the other one is just emboss. The color, though, will just use the color of your text or whatever you place it on. So this is kind of good if you wanted to get like a little bit of maybe some dark, maybe a little bit of a shadow. You can see it adds sort of an edge, sort of a shadow, which is cool if that's what you're going for. If that looks good to you, then use it. But for me, I'm going to not use it here, but just want to show you what that does. Okay, so the next thing we want to add is this CC light sweep. But actually, before we do that, because I want to show you why we're going to add the light sweep, and to show you why we're going to add it, let's first do a little bit of work. I need to learn to talk. Somebody help me. But we want to do a little bit of work on our background. And the idea here, what helps sell this, sort of shiny effect, is that it looks like there's a light source back behind here that's shining, behind the text, and the light's kind of coming through here, and the text is like absorbing some of the light. It's kind of a cool look. But to sell that, we need to get the background looking like there's some light. So to do that, what we're going to do is actually, you could add this. We're going to add a lens flare. You could add it straight to the background, but I like to do everything in layers so that I have kind of more control. If I want to just affect the lens flare, then I don't have to mess with the lens flare affecting the background. I can affect it separately. So to do that, we're going to add a new solid. And again, you can add a new solid by just clicking Command Y. But we'll do it this way. A new solid black is what we want. We want it to be black. We're going to go up to Layer, Effect, Generate, and Lens Flare. So choose the lens flare that you like. There's 3 options that come stock with After Effects. I usually use the 105mm prime. And one of the ways that I learned from another tutorial to kind of customize this is to add a CC, I think it's CC radial blur. Now the CC radial blur renders pretty slow, so I typically use the CC radial fast blur, which gives you a similar effect, but it renders much quicker. So I'm just going to apply that just to change up so this lens flare doesn't totally look like the stock After Effects lens flare. So we can change some settings here. We can change the amount that it's going to affect. And what I like about this is this sort of flary, like stretching look that it does to the that little flare there. We can change the zoom amount here, and just to your liking, and all this stuff is just personal, whatever works for you. Okay, so let's move this down below. Well, I'll show you what we're going to do in a second. Let's just put this one down below the text for now, and we're going to set the transfer mode to, I believe, screen. Yes. So there, if we get rid of our text for a second, you see the lens flare over our background, which just helps to sell the effect and look like there's light back there. So let's click on our lens flare. We're going to center it, bring our text back in. So we want this lens flare somewhere, wherever looks good for you, somewhere behind the text. I'm going to do it here a little bit differently than the first example, and just mess with it. I'm going to bring up the intensity a little bit, or the brightness, and just get something that looks pretty decent. And then what we're going to do to try to sell the effect of this light is coming through this text instead of just behind it, because you see right now it looks like there's light back there, but it doesn't look like it's affecting the text at all, and I want it to look like it's actually interacting with the text. So what we're going to do to fake that is just duplicate our lens flare. Let me name this lens flare. Stay organized. Lens flare. And I'm going to call this, if I could type it would help, I'm going to call this lens flare back. And then what we're going to do is just copy that. So I'm just going to hit Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste. Or Control C, Control V, or Command C, Command V if you're on a Mac. I'm going to take the second lens flare and rename this lens flare front just to stay organized. And I'm going to put it right in front of the text. So you can see there, it's a little bit bright. We need to do some tweaking, but it helps to sell the effect that this light back behind there is shining through the text and interacting with it. So let's just play around with the settings. I'm going to bring down the brightness just a little bit and maybe change the blend with original amount. I'm also going to change the, maybe play around with the composite mode here. I think I tried an ad before and that looks kind of cool. So anyway, whatever looks good for you. I'm just going to leave the screen because that works pretty well. And just bring down bring down the brightness a little bit more. Whatever looks good to you. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now what we're going to do is go back and click on our text layer, and we're going to add another filter to this. And this is called light sweep. So I'm not sure where that's found. I'm just going to type in light and look through here. Light sweep. There it is. CC light sweep. It looks like it's in generate. So you can find that in effects. Go down to generate and CC light sweep. And the reason it just applied not to the text but to the background is because I was clicked on my front lens flare layer instead of text. So I'm just going to delete that. Click on text. Now when I go to generate CC light sweep, it'll apply it to the text right on top there. And you can see what it does. Let me turn it off and on. It just adds another layer of light to the text. So it looks like there's light being cast on the text here. And we can play around with, the width of this. Maybe we want it, really skinny, or we want it to affect kind of more of the text. I want this to be a little bit wider because we're going to place this right over our lens flare here to help sell the effect that the light is, reacting and interacting with our text. So just play around with the settings. You have intensity setting, and you can see where it applies the intensity is to the edge of the text. And because we added the CC glass, it looks like our text has depth. And this just helps sell that a little bit more. So I don't want to go crazy with it, but definitely want it to be there. So just, play with the settings to your liking. This little dot here, just like our gradient, affects where this is placed on our text. So I'm just going to move this right over to where our lens flare is, kind of on the R and the E. And you can see the difference here, if I zoom in there, without the light sweep. It's still kind of selling the effect, but when we add the light sweep, it really helps sell it. And actually what I'm going to do, because you can see the light source, it looks like it's hitting up here higher, so I'm just going to grab our lens flare and move it up a little bit so it looks like maybe it's coming from up here and hitting the text, just to sell that a little bit more. There we go. So now you can see that there's a lot of light hitting here, so I'm actually going to bring down this lens flare that's on the front, in front of our text, because it's a little bit bright. So we'll bring that there to where it, to wherever it looks good, something like that maybe. And you could even change the front lens flare if you wanted to something else. But actually that one's kind of cool because it's casting more of this kind of flare. But I'm going to leave it at 105 prime. We could also change the color of the lens flare if we wanted to by going into, it's just called tint, and that is found in color correction. So you go to effect, color correction, down to tint. And what that's going to do is it's first going to make it black and white, but what that'll allow you to do, actually let's not use tint. There's a better one. And it's called, let's see, what's it under? It's under color correction, tritone. Tritone is perfect for lens flares, because what it allows you to do is change the color of just your shadows, just your midtones, and just your highlights. So the lens flare, if we change the highlight color, it'll really, let's just highlight, let's just solo our lens flare. So everything white in this lens flare, it's going to change to whatever color we choose for the highlights. So I want this to be maybe a light blue, but pretty white. And then we can go into our midtones, which is all of this color around the lens flare, and maybe we'll make that a little bit more, I don't know, we can make that totally green, or I want it to be fairly subtle, so maybe something like that. And then the blacks will affect obviously everything black in this layer, but we're going to leave that alone. And so let's see how that looks. Pretty cool. It's subtle because everything's blue already, but anyway, it's kind of cool to play around with. So that's starting to look pretty good. We're getting there. Let's go over to our original and see what else we could do. So if you look at our original, it looks like, we have basically the same effect. We have the light, the lens flare back behind there, and I can show you in this original composition. We have the lens flare back behind, which is adding that, and then we have the lens flare in front. Very subtle, not doing too much. And then we have, if I click on the text, we have our light sweep there. Very subtle. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm adjusting the wrong one. That's why. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so let's do. Oh, I don't. You know what? Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's actually affecting it a lot. Okay, so I also have a glow here. So let's go ahead and add the glow over here. Let me get rid of this composite because not going to use that one. Okay, so let's add a glow, and I'll show you what that does. That just it's kind of cool. It's fairly subtle, but it actually makes a pretty big difference. Oh, this is another way that you can add filters. I'm sorry, I always use this search field. So I know the thing's called a glow. You can just grab the filter and drag it right over to your layer if you want in your timeline, or straight onto your composite. But the problem, you can see what it's doing. It's trying to add it to the lens flare because that's in front. So it's just better to drag it right onto your layer. Okay. So you can see what that's done is it's caused our highlights to glow, which is what it should do. That doesn't look good, so we need to make some adjustments. So I'm going to go into, first of all, the glow threshold and play around with that. What that's going to do is tell it, okay, which areas do you want me to cause to glow? So if we bring this all the way up, it's only going to affect the brightest areas of our text, the most white blown out areas. As we bring that down, it's going to start affecting more and more. If we brought that down to 0, it would affect our entire text. So we want to, at least what I want to do, is just kind of cause those highlights to glow out a little bit. And it kind of adds some atmosphere and a little bit of depth. So I don't know, I'm at 71 here. Figure out what works for you. And then the glow radius just controls how far or how big the glow is. So if I bring that up, it starts to push out this glow. And what it's also adding is a little drop shadow effect, which I kind of like. And I'm not sure how to get rid of that. How would we get rid of that if we didn't want it? You can tell me. Somebody can tell me. Tell me. But let's move on here. Okay, so if we have this glow colors set to original colors, the glow is going to use the colors of your text. We can change that to A and B colors, and what that's going to do is allow us to choose the color of the glow using these A and B selectors here, which I think I'm going to do because using the original colors here is just it's a bit much. I'm not a big fan of that, and I think what it's doing is it's the cause of the dark glow is because it might have something to do with our threshold, and we're picking up some of the blacks and it's glowing out some of the blacks. Let's see if that is the reason. Yeah, it is. So I had my threshold turned up too high to where I was glowing out some of these darker colors instead of just glowing out our highlights. So I may have actually told you the wrong way. 0 is going to affect all of our highlights, and 100 is going to affect the whole text. I can't remember what I said. So anyway, that's obviously way too much. So I'm going to bring down the radius. Find a happy setting in there, somewhere like that. But I'm going to change this over to A and B colors. And you can see it's not doing a whole lot, but what it is doing is, like over here in our highlights, it's just helping that to glow a little bit more. So I could pull the radius a little bit more, and you can see how it just adds some softness, a little bit of atmosphere. Again, it's very subtle, and you could make it more extreme if you wanted to, and affect more and more. But I just want it to be kind of a soft, sort of glowy effect. You can control the glow intensity also, bring that up. But I want it to be pretty soft, something like that. So you can see it's not doing a whole lot, but it is just causing these bright areas to, to glow a little bit more. So anyway, you might like that, you might not. It's totally up to you. Okay, was there anything else we need to add before we move on to this kind of texture on there? There is, but we'll get to that later. Okay, looking at our original. The other thing that sells this is it looks like this text is almost made out of plastic, because it looks like some kind of like shiny material, because it's reflecting something in it. That's what it looks like anyway. And the way to get that is pretty simple. What we need to do, and this is really the essence of making cool looking text. This is the one thing that you need to get if you don't get anything else. So what we're going to do is grab some sort of texture. I think I use this one here. And this is just a photo I took last Christmas. It is of just some lights we had in our front yard. And I just took my camera out there and blurred out the lights and got this sort of light, glowy sort of effect. So what we want to do is put this layer, and I think you can find this on my website, this exact texture or photo, whatever you want to call it. You can find that at www.jasoncalhoun.info. And we want to put this layer right on top of our text. Right on top. So we just saw our lens flare pop through. And what we want to do is change the track matte. And we want to change the track matte mode of our text. So let's click on our text. And you don't have to click on it, but right over here you can see track matte. It says TRK matte. If you don't see that, you're probably seeing this. And to toggle between the two views, or the two, palettes, or whatever you want to call it, you can either go down here to this button, toggle switches / modes, and that'll go back and forth, or you can just hit F4, which is what I'm hitting right now. So what we want to do is change this track matte to something like, I think, Luma inverted matte. And what that's going to do is use the layer above it as a matte over the text. So let's just solo this text. Well, that doesn't work. I just want to get rid of the lens flares, I guess is what I want to do. So you can see the text a little bit better. That didn't help a whole lot. So what we can do is it turned off the visibility of our texture, and it's just using it as a matte. So I can still move around this texture though. And you can see that in there, what I'm going to do is resize this and make it much larger. And you can see that it's caused what looks like some, like gradient in there. It's not some gradient, but some reflectiveness of our text. It looks like it. It's kind of selling that effect. Now this is obviously too much. It's made our text much lighter and we can't see it. One of the ways we can control that is to add to this texture that's on top of our text a brightness and contrast filter. There it is, brightness and contrast. You can find that under color correction. I'm going to drag it over to my text layer. Nope, undo that. Not my text layer. I want to drag this to our texture layer right above our text. What we can do now is control the brightness and contrast, obviously, of that layer, that texture, and get a look that looks right to us. So what I did is I brought my brightness down to 0. So if we solo, well, we can't solo, but if we look at our text now, you can see what I've done is just, right here, everything white will cause your text to kind of disappear and look lighter. So if I go the other way, it helps to bring a little bit more contrast and a little bit more color back to our text. So now if we move that texture around, now it looks like there's something being reflected from our text. Like maybe this text is, some kind of shiny material, and we can see things being reflected off of it. We could maybe change the size of that. That looks better. Maybe a little bit larger. And just find, position it somewhere where it looks good to you. So there we go. Something like that. This isn't necessarily the best texture to use for this sort of look. I'd like to use something with like lights. But it works. One of the ways we can help it out a little bit is by adding a fast blur filter, which you can find under blur. Or just type in fast in the search field. Drag that over to our texture and just soften it up a little bit so we don't have these hard edges, because see, without it, and maybe you want this, maybe this is the look that you're going for, but it has these kind of hard edges, so what I'm going to do is just kind of soften those up a little bit. That was too much. There we go. Okay, so that's looking better. We're getting there. I'm going to play around with the text color a little bit because I don't like it. Make it a little bit more of a dark blue, and make it darker in general. There we go. I like that a little bit better. Change the blurriness amount. I'm going to bring it up a little bit more. I want it to blur out a little bit more. Maybe increase the size of that. It's just playing around to figure out what works. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. The other thing that I had here, let me just check and see. That's all of the filters. Yes. What I did, let me show you, is I'm going to duplicate my text. You can either hit Control D to duplicate it, to actually duplicate it, or just copy and paste it. And what I'm going to do is take my text that's on the bottom and add a filter. What is a filter called? Let me see here. There it is, CC Light Burst. Okay. Let's just go over here to the search field, type in CC Light. There we go. CC Light Burst 2.5. I'm going to add that to the text layer. There's two text layers now because we just duplicated it. I'm going to add it to the one on the bottom. And you can see, let me turn off the top layer. What that does is just adds this, kind of God ray effect. And I'm going to bring up the ray length a little bit. And a lot of settings in here. You can change the ray intensity, which is just kind of the glow. It has its own kind of built-in glow. That's pretty cool. I'll just change the burst to straight instead of fade. Let's turn on our top text. So what that does is it helps keep this kind of text intact and looking good. And then I'm going to change the bottom text, the one that we just added the CC Light Burst to. I'm going to change its composite mode to maybe an add. Lighten, no. Screen looks pretty cool. It's subtle. Maybe too subtle. There we go. Color dodge looks pretty good. Now these rays are a little bit too long for me, so I'm going to bring back the ray length a little bit. Maybe change it back to fade. Yeah, I like fade. I was just playing around. Something like that. Okay. Cool. I've noticed that when I changed the text color, that I lost some of the highlights that we have from our CC glass. So I'm going to go back into that and play around with that a little bit more. Maybe change the height and maybe the softness a little bit. The other thing that we want to do is to kind of bring back some of those highlights that we have in there is swivel down the light little knob thing there. And we can bring up the light intensity a little bit. And that'll change the whole text color and make it all brighter, but it'll also help to sell these highlights on the side a little bit more. There we go. So this light height is just changing the lightness of this what looks like the text in front, which kind of helps to sell this. See, it's adding what looks like a little bit more depth. I'm going to bring back the softness a little bit because it's a little too soft around the edges for my taste. And then bring down the height because it's a little bit too thick. There we go. That's looking better. I'm just playing around here. I'm going to play around with the displacement also. Just bring it up. Bring down the height. And bring down the softness. Just playing around to get the right look. We're almost there. That's looking better. It's not quite right, but I mean you can play around here forever. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the light intensity maybe a little bit more. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Still not quite what I want, but oh well, you get the idea. Takes a little playing around. Let me change the text color a little bit. Maybe lighten it up a tiny bit more. Bring back the displacement. Alright, so okay, I played around enough. You get the idea. Okay, so that is pretty much the finished effect. Let's change the background a little bit, make it a little bit darker. Because remember, we lightened it up earlier for this. Bring that up there. Oop. Ah! There we go. Make it a little bit darker, maybe. Which helps to sell the whole thing. And I'm still not happy with the look of this. I'd play around with it a little bit more, but I'm going to change the opacity of the bottom layer just maybe to 50%. Something in there. And one more text color change for the top layer, maybe a little bit darker. So something like that. Okay. So anyway, we need to move on here. Okay, so that's the first one, the sort of shiny text look. Not bad. You see, this one turned out a little bit better, just because I messed around with it a little bit more. But anyway, you get the idea. You can have fun with that and play around. Okay, so let's move on to this one here, this textured look. This one's actually way easier to get a cool looking effect. Not near as much tweaking. I mean, you can tweak as much as you want to get the desired look, but it's much easier to accomplish. So I'm just going to go through this real quick. Like I said in the last tutorial, though, the one thing you want to learn is just mainly this track matte thing, and that's how we get this effect, is that track matte mainly. So, new composition, 800 by 450. We want to add a new solid again. Oh no, wait, we don't. We just want a texture. So again, you can find a ton of textures on my website, www.jasoncalhoun.info. I have a texture in here that is the one I used before. It's just this old like suitcase, which is cool for the example, but I'm going to use one different for this one in particular. Use this one here, kind of like an old wallpaper. I like these old textures. And so what we want here is maybe we want text to look like it's faded and grungy and vintage, just like this background, because you know what you normally do is grab like some text and maybe some creative type here again. And you know, you go in and you'd say, okay, so let's maybe make this white so you can see it, and then we want to change the text color to maybe something that's a little bit more, you know, vintage looking or whatever. So you go in, you're like, I don't know, that one's kind of cool. And so normally you'd be like, okay, so that's it. Maybe it's a little bit too bright for your taste, so you're like, well, let's try black. I want it to look vintage and old, and no, that doesn't quite look right. Maybe we want to pick one of these colors. Maybe that'll do it. It's a little bit better, but you know, it's still not that vintagey sort of ripped up old look. And that's what we're going for. It is so simple to do. All we're going to do is grab our background, click on that, copy and paste it or duplicate it, move the duplicate copy on top of our text, and we're going to use that track matte again. And what we're going to do is use the track matte of the text, and again, it's going to use whatever layer is right on top of it, and all we have is a duplicate of the background layer. So we're going to go to Luma Inverted Matte, and already you can see what that's done. If we zoom in, is it's using that layer as a matte on top of the text, and it's the same layer as the background, so we can actually kind of, it looks like we added a composite mode because we can kind of see through the text. The cool thing is when we add to the top layer, to that copy of the background that's on top of our text that we're using as a track matte, we add that brightness and contrast filter. I'm sure there's other cool, you know, you could use a curves adjustment, you could use a levels adjustment. I just find that the brightness and contrast is easiest. It's just two little sliders and that's it. Drag it on top of that layer. Now you start dropping and playing around with the brightness and contrast controls. You'll see as we mess with the contrast especially, and start to really mess with, you know, getting our background to pop in, you know, to a desired look. So you might want it like totally black and you can't see it at all. You might want a little bit of the background to show through, and I'll show you why we want that in a minute. That's like, I mean, that right there looks kind of cool. You know, it looks like it's a part of it. But I'm just going to do something like, I don't know, this for now. The problem with this text and with most computer-generated text is the edges. The edges are so sharp. If this was old vintage text like this, I mean, nothing is really sharp in this. It's all like grungy and beat up. But the text is so sharp, you can tell it's computer-generated. So what we need to do is something like, we need to roughen up the edges. You know, we need to roughen up the edges of this text. If only there was a filter for roughening up the edges, that would save our day. Oh my word, there is. Fantastic. So let's grab this roughen edges filter, apply it to our text, and that looks terrible, right? It's all wobbly. It doesn't look like beat up. It's just wobbly. So what we need to do is just play around with the settings. So the main ones we're going to be messing with is border and edge sharpness. The first thing we're going to do is bring down the border a little bit. And that brings it back to kind of what it was originally. Edge sharpness is just that, how sharp the edge is. If we bring that out, it's going to soften the edge. Bring up the border a little bit. Bring up the edge sharpness. Or actually, bring it. Maybe go the other way. What's the deal here? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was telling you the wrong way. Bring it down, which makes sense. Bring down the edge sharpness. There's no sharpness to the edge at all. It's just this soft edge, which kind of looks cool already. And you can affect how much it affects it by changing the border amount. That's just affecting the edges. So we do want some soft edges, but I also want a little bit of some kind of grunge there. So I'm just going to bring up the sharpness a little bit. Maybe bring up the border a little bit. And what you see if we zoom in now, the text is no longer soft. If I bring off that roughen edges, see nice and soft edges, nice and hard, crisp edges like computer generated. We have this roughen edges, and suddenly it's softer. Looks like there's a little bit of grunge in there. Now to sell this even more, there's a filter called, oh, my brain. What is it called? Let me see if I still have it here. Here we go. There it is. Okay. I can never think of it. It's called displacement map. So let's type in displacement map. I'm going to drag that over to our text. This one will help sell this even more. It'll help make our text look like even more like it's a part of this background. This again, we just need to play around with these settings. We have the max displacement and the time resolve. You know what? This is the wrong one. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't recognize any of those, but I'm going to play it off as if I do. I added the wrong one. I added time displacement instead of displacement map, which is what we want. Drag it over to the text. That's more like it. First thing I want to do is tell it what map do you want to use to displace this. In other words, like, what we're going to tell this filter, we want to make this text look like something. Well, it's like, what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to kind of blend with? Well, we want it to blend with and look like and use the map of not the text itself, but our background, the vintage background. So you can click that, and already, without even changing any of the settings, you can see that it makes it makes the edges look like it's a part of the text. It makes the text look like it's more of a part of this background. It kind of adds it and brings out, like right here even, it kind of brings some of the pixels into this background a little bit. And as we change these settings, you have max horizontal and vertical. And what that's going to do is, if we bring that way over, it starts blending this text even more into the background. So we want this to be subtle. So maybe something like 2 might do it. Again, it's not much, but it's the little things that really help sell. So if we turn off that displacement map, it just helps to add a little bit more of a grunge, a little more of a beat up look to the edges, so that this text, like if we brought both of these effects off, these edge kind of effects, look at that. Our text looks sharp again. It looks computer generated. We add those. It already looks much grungier. I'm going to bring down the displacement map a little bit more. I want it to be subtle. And I'm also going to increase the edge sharpness because it's a little bit soft for me. Okay. Okay, so last thing we're going to do to really sell this and to make it look more like, where is it? Oh, that was a horrible example. That's right. Where's the original? There we go. To give it more of this sort of faded look, because if you look in this text here, like, part of the S is faded here, and then it comes back, and then it's faded down here, and the W is a little bit faded. It just looks worn. So to get that, it's very simple. What we want to do is click on our text, and we want to add some masks to this. So we want to add, you go up to your rectangle tool. It might look like a circle, which is the ellipse tool, which is actually the one. No, wait a minute. Okay, you can use this, and I have, but I want to customize it. So instead of using one of these, which I was trying to sell you on, we actually want to use the pen tool and create our own mask. So I'm just going to draw out a sort of circle around here, maybe around the top of the T, because I want the top of the T to be faded out. We connect that, and all of a sudden, oh, where's my text? What we want to do is go into our text, hit F for feather. That'll bring up the feather adjustment for the mask, and we want to increase that. Increase it. There we go. So what we have is just a little bit of the text, a little bit of the T. See what it's done is it's just softened it up a bunch, right? So what we want to do is see more of the text, so we need to do another mask. We do it down here, something like that. And there's part of our text, and we want to do the same thing. Hit F, bring up the feather property, and just feather that out. Maybe do another one up here. And what you're going to do is start adding masks where you want to see the text. You can invert the mask and do it that way, and it'll just do the opposite. Wherever you add the mask, it will just, instead of causing everything around the mask to disappear, everything within the mask will disappear, and then you soften it. And it's just doing the opposite. So that might be easier for you. Like I can show you here. If I invert this, where the mask is touching, it gets rid of. And then if I feather that, it'll start bringing it in. So you can do it that way too if that's easier for you. It's just another way of working. So whatever works for you. Just play around with these settings. And change it back from inverted, but just wanted to show you what that does. Okay, I need one more maybe over in here to finish off the T and maybe get a little bit of the top of the E. And feather it out. You know what? I need one more for the top of the E. And feather it. There we go. So something like that. I mean, you can play around with these. And anyway, what that's going to do. Oh, and by the way, if you look in here and you see it's kind of like adding these little soft bubbly looks inside the text, that's from your displacement map on the text. So if we turn that off, oh no, I'm sorry, it's from the roughen edges, sorry. You can see it gets rid of those. So what you just have to do is just go back in and play with your roughen edges again until you to where you can get rid of those. But you might like them. I mean, it's kind of a cool effect on its own. So it's just totally up to you whether you want to use them or not. I'm going to, I think. I think I will. I don't know, I kind of like without too. Yeah, I'm going to go without. I kind of like it without. So you can go back in and just readjust your masks to fit whatever works for you. Whatever floats your boat. And that's what you want to use because boats work better when they float. If your boat's not floating, then who's going to want to ride in it? It's not a boat. It's like a car. Then it's not as much fun. Okay, so there we go. I mean, you can keep tweaking this, but that's pretty cool. Another thing we can do is go back to our top layer, play with the brightness and contrast, and now you can see how much of a difference that makes. Now that we've added these other things, look at that. Huh? Look at that. Looks like it's part of this background. Now, you don't have to use the same background, though. We did just to make this text look like it's a part of this background, but you may just want this look on its own, and you may want to throw down like a totally different background, which I use all the time. So what I was saying at the beginning is this is an effect, this track mat. I put on almost all of my text and put down like a roughen edges and maybe a displacement map, just so that the text doesn't look so computer generated. It looks a little bit more rugged, a little bit more worn, and that's kind of the effect that I like. So anyway, what do we want? Something with the contrast. Just playing around. There we go. I want something more like that. That's cool. So anyway, if we got rid of this vintage background, the text looks cool on its own. We could throw down something else. We could throw down I don't know. That would look terrible. Let's throw this in there. It's huge. Resize that. Throw it in the back as a background. Anyway, that obviously doesn't look very good. I don't like that. You'd have to play around with it a little bit more. But the idea is you can get your text looking less, computer texty. Add some texture into your text, and maybe we could, add a fast blur to track matte layer to kind of blur out. So this, texture isn't quite so evident. I don't know, something like that. Actually, I don't like that, but play around with the brightness and contrast a little bit more so you don't see it. It's not quite so evident, maybe. Something like that, maybe. Kind of cool. And then, just play around a little bit more with your, on the text with your displacement map. Now, here's the problem. The displacement map went away because what we had is this set for the displacement map as a background. So what we need to do is change that to either the current background, or we can change that to our track mat that we're using here. But, whatever you want. So anyway, that's pretty much it. You can keep playing, but, those are some cool ways to get more out of your text than maybe you're getting right now. Some shiny text, some textured text. It's all really done with track mats and putting the texture over your text and using that as a track mat. Anyway, hope this was helpful. Hopefully it'll help with your next composite or motion graphics work you're doing with your text. Have fun with it. Make sure you check out my website, my blog at www.jasoncalhoun.info. I will talk to you next time. All right, goodbye.